and welcome back to the lab. Today we're going to be looking at a single replacement reaction and then doing some stoichiometric calculations to figure out exactly what was going on with our product. We're going to use the stoichiometry to figure out how much product could we have formed, and then when we look at the end of our reaction, we'll figure out how much product we actually formed, and then we can calculate a percent yield. All right, so for this reaction, you're going to need your materials kit that is going to be listed single replacement reaction, stoichiometry, and percent yield. Inside of this materials kit, you will find some foil, a couple filter papers, a funnel, and this blue bottle here, copper 2 sulfate. It's approximately 1 molar. All right, now copper 2 sulfate. You can see it's this nice, pretty blue color. The blue color is coming from the copper 2 ion. During this reaction, you'll be adding some aluminum foil to your copper 2 sulfate solution. Aluminum and copper undergo a single replacement reaction. Aluminum is more active than copper. So when placed into a solution that has copper ions, the aluminum wants to dissolve and become an ion, and then the copper will precipitate out. The nice thing about the copper being so blue, or the copper 2 being so blue, is as you add the aluminum, one of the ways you will know your reaction is occurring is not just the formation of the product or maybe some gas evolving, but what you'll see is the blue color of the solution will gradually disappear as well. All right, so you'll have those ready. Okay, from your equipment kit, you will want your 50 ml graduated cylinder. So that's the large one here. You will need your electronic balance. Okay. All right. You'll want a couple of your pipettes. All right. You'll want a couple of spoons. You will need a weigh boat. You'll want your beaker. Okay, we also recommend that you have your 10 ml graduated cylinder and an extra cup handy. All right, and then you will also need your ruler. Okay, and some sodium chloride. All right, so at the beginning of our time together, I mentioned that sodium chloride was a very common item that is used in the lab kit. So I always have a little thing of sodium chloride and actually a little thing of sugar sitting in my supplies so that they're ready to go. Now, later on during this reaction, or during this experiment rather, you're going to need to dry your product. You can dry your product overnight, but it takes a really long time. And if there's any moisture in the air, it's going to take an even longer time. So we recommend that you actually use the oven drying method. So I also have ready to go a little baking pan and an extra piece of foil. So with my extra piece of foil that I got from my kitchen, I'm just going to line my baking pan. All right, so that I will be able to dry my product later. Okay, if you want to have your oven ready to go, you can heat it to 225, or you can finish the reaction first and then you can worry about your oven later. But if you want to use your time efficiently, you can let your oven preheat while you're doing this portion of the experiment. All right, so the reaction itself is fairly straightforward, but we want to make sure that we are actually getting some good numbers, because this is going to be a quantitative experiment, not just a qualitative experiment. In a qualitative experiment, we're just caring that things happen and we take observations down. In a quantitative experiment, not only do we take observations down as to what's happening, but we also want numbers. Because remember, one of our goals later is to figure out not just the theoretical yield, but to figure out the percent yield. So we have to have good numbers, all right? So I'm gonna make sure my PPE is ready to go. I've got my gloves on, I've got my coat on, you'll have your aprons on. Let me get out my safety glasses, okay? And now I'm ready to go. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you know how much of your copper 2 sulfate you are putting into your beaker. So this bottle is going to have more than 50 mils in it. So what you will need to do on your data table here, okay, is you are going to need on that volume of 1 molar copper 2 sulfate, you're going to need to write 2 volumes down. So it says show your work. So this will just be a simple addition. So in my show your work spot, I'm going to write both my volumes down so that I can add them when I'm done. Okay, so I'm gonna get out my handy calculator here. Okay, so my first volume. Now, one thing to pay attention to is if you get a lot of air bubbles, that will affect your volume reading. So I'm going to carefully just kind of pour down the side. So I don't need to get it exactly to 50 mils this first time because I'm going to be recording the exact volume. So I'm going to stop there. That way I don't overshoot it. And if for some reason I end up needing a third one, all I have to do is add all the numbers. All right, so I'm going to get down here, get to eye level. I'm at 47. Oh, it looks like I'm right under. So it looks like I'm about 46.9. All right, so I'm gonna write down 46.9 milliliters here. Okay, pour that into my beaker. All right, and I'm going to pour out more of this. It looks like. Okay, I'm gonna not go all the way. Oh, I got that right on the 50 mark. So if it's right on the line, do I just write 50 down? Now I'm gonna write 50.0. I'm not gonna lose my sig figs. All right, so I'm gonna write 50.0. Pour that out. Okay, and then I'll get the last little bit here. Right, my last little bit looks like I'm at about 6.8 milliliters. Right, so there in that line, I have all those numbers down, and now I can add those up later and transfer that final number to that answer column. Okay, let's go ahead and pour this out. All right, now what I need to do before I actually start my experiment is I'm going to add a catalyst. Single replacement reactions are not the fastest reactions. They do go a little bit slower than some other reactions. This particular reaction will be sped up if I add some sodium chloride. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my spoons and I'm just going to add a scoop of my sodium chloride in there. Okay, all right. I want to make sure that dissolves, so I'm going to stir it around really well. Okay, now here's where you need your ruler. Okay, it's going to ask you to cut a 4 by 12 inch piece of aluminum foil. So I'm going to unfold my foil here. Okay. I'm going to need a pair of scissors. It's not important that you are super exact on the 4 by 12, but you want to be around that. So let's see here. All right. Okay, it can also help too if you have a little marker because the ruler is only 6 inches. So I'm going to make a mark here. And then, let's see here, that's not quite 12 inches. Let's see, what if I go the other way? That's also not quite 12 inches, so that's okay. Again, it's not important that you're exactly 12 inches because you do have more aluminum foil than it says. So if you do end up needing to get a little bit more later, you should be able to. All right, so I'll mark my 4 inches there. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my foil. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside so I can use it again later if I need to. All right, now I need to record my foil mass, okay? So I'm gonna get out my balance. You don't want the foil to be hanging off the balance. So when you get the mass of your foil, you want to go ahead and fold it back up again, very loosely. Okay, we're going to turn it on, make sure we are in grams. Okay, we're going to put our foil on there, and I have 1.21 grams of foil. Now it does say it's best to use between 1.4 and 1.6, so I don't have exactly that yet, so I'm going to cut a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to add that on here, weigh it all together. 1.45. Okay, so I'm good. So my massive aluminum foil, 1.4, or actually 1.43 now that it's settled, okay? 1.43 grams. Okay, now you are going to want to add this in small pieces to your beaker, okay? You definitely do not want to just dump the whole thing in. If you just dump the whole thing in, it's not going to go very well. So we're going to start adding small pieces. And again, this may go a little bit slow, so I'm not going to go through the whole entire addition right now. I'm just going to add a little bit, see if I can get it going so you can sort of see what it looks like. All right. Yeah. So I'm starting to get some bubbling and some fizzing. All right. So maybe you can see there. You're starting to get a little bit of bubbling, a little bit of fizzing, okay? As it's going, you'll start seeing the copper color form on the surface of the aluminum. And then as you stir it around, that'll go into solution. The aluminum will disappear and you will end up with your copper. All right, so I'm just gonna keep adding slowly until we get that aluminum to dissolve and that copper to come out of solution. And again, as you go, not only will you see the aluminum dissolve, not only will you see the solid copper forming, but the blue color of the solution is due to that copper 2 ion. So as you precipitate out the copper, the blue color will go away. The aluminum ion is colorless in solution. All right, so you should hear some fizzing. You'll see some bubbles. All right. And you'll just keep going until you manage to get all of that to dissolve. Here, I'll add a little bit more. Now, if you add too much aluminum foil, you can, with the hydrochloric acid that's in your kit, you can try adding a few drops of that, very carefully, 1 drop at a time, to see if you can get the aluminum to redissolve. But if you're careful about how you add your aluminum, that shouldn't be too big of an issue, okay? Because the whole point at the end is you don't want any aluminum left and you just want to weigh your copper. Now think about that for a moment, all right? If at the very end you have a bunch of aluminum left in here and you go to collect your final product, are you going to get an accurate final product, or will any excess aluminum there affect your percent yield? All right, so you can think about that. All right, so we're continuing to add this. All right, my solution's definitely looking a little bit different now since I've got more of that copper starting to precipitate out. Okay, again, you gotta be a little bit patient. It definitely works better if you stir it as you go. Okay, we're just gonna keep adding. All right, I'll let that go. Now, what you'll want to do is once your reaction is finished, you're going to want to go ahead and get your filter paper and your funnel set up, okay? So you can fold your filter paper, okay? All right, I like to fold mine in half and then in half again, and then I fold my sides up like this. So it looks like this, and I find that helps me put it in the funnel, okay? Now, this is going to tell you to put your funnel in your graduated cylinder. Well, here's the thing. We've used that graduated cylinder, right? And now it's got a little bit of stuff left in it potentially. So you want to make sure that you are able to rinse this out first. So I'm actually going to get another cup out. Okay, I'm going to use my grease pencil, and I'm going to label this as waste. Okay. You're collecting the solid copper. So the solution in here really shouldn't affect anything, but it's always better to rinse it out before you use it again. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse it and then put my waste off to the side. Now it's okay if it's still wet in there because you'll be adding some water. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get this inside of our little funnel here. You may need to kind of fold some of the edges around like that. So I folded that edge and I folded that edge. So that way it fits inside of my funnel. Okay, so it's gonna look like that inside of your funnel. Now, one thing is that it helps if you rinse this down a little bit first, because that helps the funnel or the paper stick to the sides of the funnel and hold its shape a little bit. Okay, now I haven't completely finished my reaction yet, but I want to show you a little bit of the filtering process. So I'm going to go ahead and try to get some of my copper out of here without using too much of my solution. Well, let me add a little more foil here. Definitely got a bunch of copper in there, but it wants to bring all the solution with it. Because I haven't really done a whole lot of reacting there. Okay. Because you'll want this, like I said, to be completely reacted. Let me see if I can get more of it to react off. Oh, I'm getting some good steam and stuff there. This is an exothermic reaction, and so if you add a lot of the aluminum foil and you feel the sides of the beaker, it's going to get fairly warm. All right, here, let me just go ahead and speed this up a bit. I'll add a whole bunch. Very exciting. Actually, I think this reaction is pretty cool. I love seeing the aluminum dissolve and the copper come out. All right. You can see our solution definitely looks different than it did before. So it's getting all weird colored right now because we've got a whole bunch of that copper in there. And that sodium chloride definitely helps this go faster. Don't skip that step. This is actually going a little faster than I expected it to, so I think I'm going to go ahead and finish reacting mine so I can show you the whole filtration. Almost done here. Not a whole lot of blue left in there anymore. Because we are trying to figure out which was limiting, you do want to go ahead and add all of that foil that you weighed out. Okay, almost done. So as I'm adding more, I'm getting a lot more steam and, vapor coming off as things react. So I'm leaning back from it a little bit so I don't just inhale all of that vapor that's coming off. All right, we'll be able to do our full filtration here. Okay. Wish it were cold out in my garage. The hot beaker would feel good. All right. Okay. All right, now your instructions do mention to let it settle and everything before you filter it, but I'm going to go ahead and filter it so that we can move on. All right. Okay, so as you are filtering, you want to be very careful, okay, that you pour into the center of that filter paper. Now, as you're filtering too, mine looks like there might be a little bit of blue left, which means that probably not all the copper came out of solution, which is going to lead me to believe that more than likely my aluminum would have been my limiting reagent there. But I also didn't let mine settle either. I'm trying to go a little quicker so that I can get to the next step for you all. Okay, now this is going to have more volume of solution in it than the graduated cylinder is going to hold. So that waste container that I set up a minute ago, I can periodically stop and pour some of my filtrate out. Okay, this is just a simple gravity filtration. Yeah, so if we add more aluminum foil, we could probably get the rest of that blue color to go away. But we quantitatively weighed out our aluminum foil, so we don't want to do that. So if your solution still has some blue color left to it, that's okay. That just means that your aluminum is going to tell you how much copper was able to be formed. Okay. We've gotten a lot of the liquid off. I'll let that finish filtering through. And then we've got just a whole bunch of copper sitting in the beaker here.
Sorry, I didn't get that. The internet isn't reachable.
Oh, okay. My husband's block rocker that he has out here apparently was turned on and listening to everything I was saying. Okay. So now that I've gotten most of the liquid out, I'm going to start just scraping my copper carefully into the funnel. Okay, so you can see I've got all this copper in here now. Okay, so we'll carefully get all that copper out. Okay. Now some of the copper is going to stick. So now I'm going to need to rinse with some deionized water. So it's going to give you some volumes of deionized water to rinse with. The easiest way to pour, I don't like to pour out of this thing, so this other plastic cup I got out, I'm going to pour into there. And now I can go ahead and do my rinses. Okay, now the rinses, it's not super critical that you are perfect about it. So this is going to tell you to add about 20 mils. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit in there. Okay. Stir it around and then carefully pour that into here. Now your funnel will be pretty full at this point. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure you're only pouring a little bit at a time. That way you don't overfill your funnel. If you overfill your funnel, then you'll just make a mess. Okay. Now that you've got all the copper solid in there, it's going to take a little bit longer to filter. So just be patient. All right, let it filter down. Okay. And we're going to do this rinsing a couple of times to make sure that we're able to get all that copper out. I'm also going to use the spoon to help scrape it out into there. Okay, I'll add a little bit more. Okay, I don't have a whole lot left in my beaker. Okay. All right, again, be super careful here. You don't overfill your funnel. very carefully pour all that in there and make sure I get all of that out of there. If a bunch of copper sticks to your beaker and you don't get it out, is that a place where you could affect your percent yield? Okay, I have a little bit more in my beaker, so I'm just gonna add a tiny bit more to my beaker to help get that last little bit out. Okay, now, once you have all that out, you do want to wash what's in here with some water. So that's where you're gonna take a plastic pipette, and I'm just gonna wash the edges of this, wash the center of it. Oh, I'm getting a little full. It's not gonna drain as well, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour this out into my waste container here. Okay. All right, rinse my sides. And do this for about 20 mils of water. These plastic pipettes, let's see here. If I do one squeeze, and then I check with my, so one squeeze was about 2 mils for me. That wasn't filling the whole bulb up. So if I do this about 10 times, that's about my 20 mils, okay? All right, so I'm gonna do that. Again, being careful I don't overflow my funnel. All right, and then once I've done that, I can just go ahead and let that sit. Okay, and so you're going to let that finish dripping through and get it as dry as possible as you're dripping through. Okay. Now, what you will need are paper towels. Okay. So I'm going to get some paper towels. I'm going to fold a nice bit of paper towel buffer here. Okay, this does say to let it go for about 10 minutes. I'm going to go a little quicker since I'm trying to do a demonstration here. All right, so after you've let that filter through, you'll remove this from there and you will unfold it onto your filter paper like this. Using your spoon, you can carefully spread your copper out, okay? The more spread out it is, the easier it's going to be to dry it, all right? So it's going to look like this. And then after you let this sit for a little while, let the paper towel absorb a bunch of the water, let it get as dry as possible. Then you will transfer this to your baking sheet that's lined with aluminum foil. And then you can place this in your oven at 225. You'll want to keep an eye on it. Let's see here. These directions say about 20 to 30 minutes to remove the water. What I would do is I would turn the light on your oven on, and then I would periodically check it about every 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure that you're not starting to char or burn the edges of the filter paper. So just be smart about it, check it every once in a while, and you should be okay. And then once it's done in the oven, you're gonna pull it out. You're going to let it cool down completely. And then using a weigh boat and your balance, you'll be able to then figure out the final mass of copper. You'll scrape all the copper off of your filter paper. Normally, it would be a little bit better to just actually pre-weigh the filter paper and then weigh the filter paper with your product on it. But these balances are really small. And once you get that product off, trying to keep it on the filter paper, because the filter paper is fairly big compared to the balance, might be a little bit difficult to not lose it. The weigh boat, the circle of this does not exceed the size of the balance. And so you'll be able to get a more accurate mass by having that circle on there instead of the big filter paper falling off the edges. All right, so that is this reaction. Hopefully you enjoy it. I think it's a pretty cool one. I love watching the copper slowly go away, or not go away, but I love watching the copper slowly precipitate out of solution, lose some of that blue color, and then end up with all of this solid copper when you're all done. All right, so that is our experiment, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's see here. I have a bunch of stuff all over here and not a whole lot of reach to turn my camera off. I think I'm going to unlock the wheel on that and then move this. There we go. All right.